The phone rang that morning, and everything changed. Sarah Thompson, burning up with fever and barely conscious, couldn't answer. But her daughter Emma could. At just 7 years old, she slipped into her favorite pink dress, grabbed her mom's most important documents, and walked straight into a room full of powerful executives. The CEO nearly choked on his coffee, a girl so small, standing tall among giants. But how could a child survive in a world built for adults? And what happened next? No one could have seen coming. If stories like this speak to your heart, go ahead and drop a comment, hit that subscribe button, and share this with someone who needs to meet this tiny hero. Sunlight filtered through cracked blinds, painting streaks of gold across the kitchen table, where overdue bills, crumpled drafts, and a glass of cold tea told the story of a quiet war. An invisible battle Sarah Thompson had been fighting for months. The ideas that once lit her up now weighed like bricks on her feverish shoulders. Even with tired eyes, her mind scanned charts she no longer had the strength to open. Her proposal was groundbreaking, a renewable energy project that could pull Horizon Enterprises back from the edge of collapse. For years, Sarah worked late into the night, Emma often sleeping beside her, buried in a nest of papers. But now, just when everything was finally on the line, her body gave out. The fever wasn't just a symptom. It was a scream for help. She knew the meeting was today. She also knew Harrison, Horizon's cold and calculating CEO, wasn't one for second chances. "If she doesn't show up, the deal's off," he'd said in one of his last emails. But how could she show up when she could barely stand? Sarah had bet everything on this project, even time with her daughter, and now it felt like she might have lost it all. In the corner of the room, a framed photo of Sarah and Emma at the park seemed to mock her. The two of them, laughing on a carousel, carefree, unaware of the years ahead filled with deadlines, stress, and sleepless nights. Emma's gaze in the photo was pure admiration, and that's what hurt the most now, the fear of letting her down. Emma, hiding just behind the cracked door, had heard every word of that phone call the night before. She understood more than any 7-year-old should that the company needed the project, that her mom was too sick to go, and that no one was going to wait. When she saw her mother sweating through the night, her eyes rolling back in the pillow, Emma made a decision that would change everything. Outside, car tires screeched on the rain-slick streets. Inside the apartment, time froze, like even the air was holding its breath with Sarah. She tried to sit up, but her body refused. The thermometer slipped off the table and shattered on the floor. That's when she noticed Emma was gone. The camera pans to Emma's unmade bed, her closet half open, and the empty space where the briefcase used to be. Sarah's heart kicked hard in her chest, trying to make up for all the slow days before. Her instincts flared. Dragging herself to the phone, she dialed neighbors, friends, even the school. "Have you seen Emma? Please. She's missing." Meanwhile, Emma turned the corner downtown, barely balancing the weight of the case in her arms, but her eyes were locked in, sharp, focused. She knew exactly where she needed to go. Horizon Enterprises was 9 blocks away. With each step, she repeated the words she'd heard her mom whisper on every call. "We're out of time." Back home, Sarah dropped to her knees, her damp forehead pressed against the cold floor. Tears mixed with sweat, her lips trembling as she whispered, "They're not going to wait," and she went anyway. But the question hung heavy in the air. Could a 7-year-old girl, armed with nothing but a briefcase and fierce courage, really make it in time? Emma's skip down the sidewalk was more than childlike. It was a fearless dance in the middle of chaos. Her pink dress twirled in the breeze, and her worn-out shoes tapped a steady rhythm against the concrete. The briefcase dragged at her arms, heavy and awkward, but she never complained. Her eyes were locked on the towering glass building in the distance, as if daring the sky itself. She didn't know what failure was. She only knew she had to try. The horns, the shouting, the rush of footsteps around her, it all seemed to blur at the edges. In her mind, memories flickered. Her mom's notebooks filled with scribbled ideas, the big words Sarah explained like they were magic spells, and all the moments when it felt like no one was listening, except Emma always was. It was like her tiny heart had soaked up every silent battle fought in that small apartment full of thin walls and big dreams. Emma had always been different. She didn't have many toys, but she stacked books like towers and caught words in the air like wildflowers. She couldn't conjugate fancy verbs, but she understood business the way other kids understood dolls, from the inside out, with love. She'd sit behind the half-open door during her mom's meetings and sketch graphs in her school notebook while the other kids colored houses. "Stars don't just shine, they burn," she whispered as she crossed the street, recalling something Sarah once said. Probably without realizing she'd planted a seed. Emma believed that. That to be a star meant to light the way, yes, but also to endure the heat. And today she was ready to burn if she had to. A sudden trip nearly knocked her down, but a strong hand caught her in time. A young man with a crooked tie and a surprised look knelt beside her. "You okay?" he asked. Emma nodded, breathing hard. "I'm heading to an important meeting." He raised an eyebrow, noticing the briefcase and the pink dress. "Alone?" She looked him straight in the eye. "My mum couldn't make it. But it's her project. I know everything." His name was Daniel Carter, a lawyer on the edge of forgetting why he ever cared. But the spark in Emma's eyes stopped him cold. "Want me to walk you there?" he offered before he could think twice. Emma studied him for a moment, then gave a small smile. "Okay, but you can't carry my case. That's my responsibility." He laughed, and they started walking. As they moved through the city, Emma talked about her mom, the project, the formulas she'd memorized just by listening in the background. Daniel, who hadn't felt moved by anything real in years, felt humbled beside her. There was more wisdom in this little girl than in half the boardrooms he'd ever sat in. Up ahead, the Horizon Enterprises building rose like a promise. Daniel glanced at her again, this time with deeper curiosity. "You sure about this?" Emma didn't answer. She just tightened her grip on the briefcase and stared at the towering floors, like they were mountains she was born to climb. He knew her answer, and somewhere deep down, something inside him began to shift too. When they reached the front doors, she turned to him and said, "Thanks for walking with me. I've got it from here." But would the world even let a child walk through that door? Or would she have to fight her way in with courage? The screen splits in two. On one side, Emma's small feet step onto the cold marble floor of Horizon's lobby, surrounded by the sharp clicks of designer heels rushing past. On the other, Sarah's unsteady steps drag across the worn wood of their apartment floor, every movement a battle against the dizziness. The fever still burns in her body, but the panic is stronger than the pain. She calls out for her daughter over and over. The silence that answers her is what hurts most. Clutching the briefcase, Emma approaches the receptionist, who looks at her like she's a hallucination. "I have a meeting with Mr. Harrison," she says, voice steady and rehearsed. The woman blinks. "How old are you?" 7. But that's not the point. Her eyes are far too serious for a child. The receptionist hesitates. Emma continues, "My mom couldn't come. I came in her place." Meanwhile, Sarah calls the school, the neighbor, Emma's phone, still charging on the nightstand. Each unanswered call cuts deeper. She tries to get out the door, but nearly collapses. The fever screams through her skull like a siren. In the bathroom mirror, she stares at a stranger, but she can't stop. Emma's out there, alone. Back at Horizon, Daniel spots Emma being stopped by security. Without thinking, he steps forward and flashes his badge. "She's with me. We represent Miss Sarah Thompson." The receptionist swallows hard. "Let me check with the executive floor." But Daniel's already leading Emma toward the elevator. Inside, she grips the railing. Her hands shake slightly, but she hides it well. "Thanks for not giving up on me," she says softly. He glances down. Who said I didn't come for you? The elevator rises slowly. Each glowing number feels like another rung of bravery up Emma's spine. She thinks of all the nights she curled up next to her mom, hearing that tired voice say, "Sometimes the world just needs someone to speak from the heart." She doesn't understand it all yet, but she knows one thing. In that room, she won't just be a kid. She'll be a daughter, an heir, a messenger. Outside Horizon, Sarah stumbles toward the building, helped by the neighbor. Her hair clings to her forehead, and her breathing's ragged. She went on her own, she whispers, her voice cracking. The neighbor tries to soothe her, but there's no comfort for a mother who feels like she failed. Sarah knows exactly where Emma went, and even with nothing left in her, she keeps going. Inside, Emma presses the button for the top floor. Her heart beats like a drum in her chest. Daniel tries to distract her with small talk, but she's no longer listening. She's running through formulas, numbers, graphs in her head. That briefcase isn't just her mother's. It's part of her now. I can't afford to mess this up, she thinks. But even if she does, at least she tried. At the front desk, Sarah bends over, gripping her knees. Her legs nearly give out, but when she sees Horizon's gold sign gleaming in the sun, her eyes fill with tears. "Please let me in. My daughter's inside." The guard hesitates, until Daniel appears again and opens the path. They lock eyes for the first time, him, surprised by her fragility. Her, too breathless to say thank you. Upstairs, the elevator doors glide open. Emma takes a deep breath. The long hallway stretches ahead like an arena. Each click of her shoes echoes against the walls. As she nears the conference room door, she tightens her grip on the briefcase and whispers, "It's my turn now." But will the world listen to what a little girl has to say? The meeting room doors swung open with a sharp click, revealing a massive table surrounded by executives in dark suits, open folders, and half-drunk coffees. At the head sat Mr. Harrison, crisp suit, bored expression. He looked up and froze. Coffee nearly spilled from his hand as he saw a tiny girl standing at the doorway in a pink dress, gripping a grey briefcase like she owned the place. "And who are you?" he asked, furrowing his brow. Emma took a deep breath. "I'm here on behalf of my mom. She's sick." Her voice rang out, steady and clear, like a sharp note in a silent symphony. One executive let out a muffled chuckle, but no one dared say a word after that. Harrison stared, trying to figure out if this was some kind of prank. Emma walked with purpose to the center of the room. The briefcase looked like it weighed 3 times as much, but she never let go. She found a small stool in the corner, climbed on it, and with some effort opened the case. Papers flew out like autumn leaves. She calmly sorted them, just like she'd watched her mom do 100 times. "This is the energy transition project Horizon needs," she said, pointing to the first chart. CFO Margaret's eyes narrowed. She recognized the data, but the numbers had changed. "These figures, they're not the same as the last version." Emma nodded. "I updated them. I used urban solar energy parameters and reorganized the risk distribution." Chairs shifted. Executives leaned in. A director cleared his throat. "You understand what you're talking about?" She looked up, unblinking. "Of course. I've heard my mom repeat this stuff on dozens of calls. I took notes. I studied. I just want you to listen before you throw her work away." Harrison crossed his arms, still skeptical. "And what makes you think you can just come here and take your mom's place?" Emma didn't flinch. "Because no one knows this project better than me, not even her. She didn't know that." Silence, thick and stunned. Flashbacks show Emma sitting in the dim bedroom light, tracing graphs with colored pencils, adjusting calculations using her school textbooks. Her math notebook was full of formulas never taught in class. This wasn't pretend. It was study. It was love. It was resilience. Just outside the door, Daniel listened through a small gap, his face frozen in stunned admiration. Downstairs, Sarah was being helped up the stairs by a staff member. She always knew Emma was smart, but she never imagined her daughter would go this far for her. Harrison asked for a copy of the data. His hands trembled slightly as he read. His eyes darted across the page, stopped, then looked up. "Who taught you this?" Emma smiled, a little mischievously. "My mom. And a bit of curiosity, too." Harrison leaned back, thoughtful. For the first time, he wasn't trying to shut the meeting down. He was listening. Emma took a breath, her eyes shimmering and her voice catching slightly. "I just want my mom to be seen, even if it has to be through me." But could the glow of this little star cut through the shadows in that room? She held the presentation remote like it was a magic wand. Colorful graphs appeared on the screen, and her voice flowed with a shocking ease. It wasn't just the information, it was how she made it human. Facts wrapped in childlike metaphors, clarity mixed with wonder. "If you place the panels where the sun shines the most, it's like putting a plant on a windowsill. It grows happier." A few executives smiled, almost involuntarily. Outside the room, Daniel stood behind a glass partition, still watching. Every word Emma spoke pierced something inside him, something he thought had gone numb. He thought of his sister, who died from an illness like Sarah's. He thought of all the years he'd spent fighting for causes he didn't believe in. But now, for the first time in ages, he felt alive. Inside, Margaret, the CFO, crossed her arms, trying to hide a smile threatening to break free. Her eyes glistened. Something in Emma reminded her of her own daughter, who studied abroad and rarely called. "She talks like she's 7 and 70, she whispered. The director beside her nodded, eyes glued to the screen. Harrison, still testing her, narrowed his eyes. "What if the maintenance costs double in the first year?" Emma answered instantly. "Long-term gains will triple. Those costs will feel like a stubbed toe at the start of a marathon." Another director challenged her on legal risk. She responded by quoting a clause from Horizon's own contract. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was awe. Meanwhile, downstairs, Sarah clung to the railing, pale, trembling, but determined. A guard offered her a wheelchair. She refused. "I need to see this with my own eyes," she whispered. The fever still raged, but her heart now beat with something else. It was as if Emma's courage was pushing her up the stairs. A secretary slipped quietly into the room and handed Emma a note. It was from Daniel. "I'm here. Go all the way." She smiled and tucked it into her pocket like a lucky charm. The strength she felt in that moment was something new. The strength of not being alone anymore. Even in a room full of giants, she knew now. Kind eyes were watching her. At 10:47 a.m., Emma wrapped up the presentation. "And that's why this proposal isn't just good. It's necessary," she said, resting her hands on the documents. For a second, no one moved. Then, one solitary clap. Margaret. Then 2 more. Then, like a rising wave, the whole room erupted in applause. Emma bowed her head, blinking back tears, trying to stay composed. But her eyes were full. At that exact moment, the doors burst open. Sarah stumbled in, breathless, face damp, eyes wide, her gaze locked with Emma's, just as the little girl turned around. And the world stood still. But will this reunion be a moment of peace, or the start of a brand new storm? The sound of applause still echoed through the room when Sarah burst in, eyes wide and breath ragged. Her shirt clung to her fevered skin, her face pale, hair stuck to her forehead. Every part of her screamed urgency. Emma turned the second she saw her, and for that moment she forgot the boardroom full of strangers and ran straight into her mother's arms. Their hug was silent but fierce. Mother and daughter, 2 survivors, 2 halves of the same heart. But the spell didn't last. Director Richard Evans, the coldest and most skeptical of them all, slammed his hand on the table. "This is a spectacle, and reckless," he spat. "A child tampering with confidential data? Walking into a boardroom without formal clearance? This is a bad joke. Silence fell again, heavier this time, sharper. Emma, still wrapped in her mother's arms, turned to face him, her eyes a mix of fear and fire. I just wanted to help. I knew everything. I heard you ask my mom about cutting Q2 costs. I listened to every call. Richard's eyes widened. You altered the data? His voice dropped in volume but rose in danger. Sarah tried to step in. She didn't mean any harm. I was sick. I didn't know she... But Emma raised her chin. I updated the profit projection. I optimized operating costs based on what I heard. I just wanted you to see that she's brilliant, that's all. Her eyes shimmered with tears, but the spark remained raw and untamed, lit by love. Richard's face twisted. Do you have any idea what it means to manipulate a contract? That could be considered fraud. How do we know she didn't sabotage this on purpose? His words exploded like thunder. Sarah staggered, overwhelmed by fever and fear. Emma froze. For a few long seconds, the girl who had faced down an entire boardroom suddenly looked every bit her 7 years. Mr. Harrison stood slowly. The room went dead quiet. He scanned the altered report in his hands, face unreadable. You really changed these numbers? He asked in a near whisper. Emma nodded, lips trembling. Yes, I just wanted to help my mom. The honesty in her voice hit hard, so much so that Margaret looked down, fighting tears. Flashbacks filled the screen. Emma under a blanket with a flashlight, copying spreadsheets into her school notebook, counting on her fingers. Her pencil was her shield. She didn't play with dolls. She played at saving her mom. Her room, scattered with colored paper and scribbles, had become a lab built on love. Sarah reached for her daughter's hand. She didn't mean any harm. I should have seen this coming. Her voice cracked. A harsh cough escaped, and Daniel rushed to steady her. Sweat trickled down her neck. Margaret stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on Emma's shoulder. Let me see the calculations. She scanned the pages quickly. Her eyes widened. These numbers, they're accurate. The room filled with a new kind of tension, shock, but Harrison still hesitated. The weight of responsibility, of potential scandal, of not knowing what came next, pressed on his shoulders. Then he looked straight at Emma. His voice was calm but pointed. Can you promise me you didn't do this for fun? But can the heart of a child really carry the weight of a crumbling empire? The silence was suffocating. Emma stared into Harrison's eyes, teary but unshaken. His question echoed inside her. Can you promise me this wasn't a game? She took a breath, swallowed her fear, and answered softly but surely, because she taught me that giving up is never an option. Something cracked in the room. For the first time, no one dared interrupt her. Margaret, still holding the papers, turned to Harrison. I reviewed every number. It's all correct. Actually, it's better than the original. She looked back at Emma, her voice thick. What this girl did is extraordinary. Richard scoffed but said nothing. Something in him had crumbled too. Harrison was still wrestling with himself, his face a battleground between doubt and awe. Meanwhile, Sarah, pale and shaking, was helped into a chair beside Emma. Their fingers found each other, Emma's touch a quiet apology, a wordless vow. Sarah squeezed her hand, her voice barely a breath. You're my courage, my little star. Emma closed her eyes and leaned her forehead against her mother's. In that moment, they recharged each other. Harrison leaned back slowly. She has talent, but it's not just about that. His eyes shifted to Sarah. How can I trust a team led by a child? Before Sarah could answer, Daniel stepped in. She only had to do this because no one gave her mother a chance, because you'd rather control than listen. His tone was calm, but razor sharp. A new current filled the room. Not numbers, but humanity. Harrison's gaze dropped. Margaret, now steadier, turned to Emma. Would you mind finishing the last slides? Emma stood again, more timid now, but still steady. Her voice had changed. Each word carried the weight of being seen, not just heard. Little by little, the eyes around the table softened. One executive started taking notes. Another nodded in quiet approval. Richard stayed silent, but his glare no longer burned. Harrison tapped his fingers on the table. When Emma finished, there were no claps this time, but something more important filled the air: respect and quiet attention. Sarah, voice barely above a whisper, turned to Harrison. "She just did what any of you would do for someone you love. Maybe even more." Daniel added, "What she did today isn't just rare, it's real, it's commitment." And for the first time, Harrison had no comeback, just a thoughtful expression and a pen spinning between his fingers. Emma stepped closer to the edge of the table. "You can pretend none of this ever happened, or you can choose to change." She lowered her eyes. "But if it's up to me, I won't give up. Not on my mom. Not on her idea." And when she looked back up, something had shifted inside her and in every single person in that room. But was this miracle enough, or was something even bigger still waiting to be revealed? Mr. Harrison's pen hovered over the contract. The entire room held its breath. Emma stood tall. Sarah sat beside her, their fingers intertwined like roots clinging to uncertain ground. This felt like the end of a long road, or the start of something brand new. "All right," Harrison murmured. But before he could sign, a voice cut through the silence. "Wait," it was Richard, and his tone was dripping with acid. "Before we start throwing confetti at a child, maybe you should all take a look at this," he said, raising a printed sheet. Her so-called adjustments exposed a critical flaw in the original model. And do you know what that means? It means the original plan was wrong. Heads turned toward him in confusion. Margaret grabbed the page from his hand and scanned it. Her eyes widened. "But he's right." Harrison narrowed his eyes. "What are you talking about?" Margaret explained, still piecing it together. Emma's updates, by reducing the transition cost, exposed an investment clause that was buried. A hidden gap. Sarah lifted her head, stunned. "That wasn't in our last report," Margaret nodded, "but it's in this one." Richard stood, his face flushed. "Of course it was in there, it just wasn't relevant." But his tone betrayed him, shaky, defensive. Emma watched him carefully. Then, like pulling something out of the back of her memory, she whispered, "You used to call my mom late at night. You talked about changing timelines and told her to ignore something." The room froze. Sarah turned to her, eyes wide. "What?" Emma continued, voice small but steady. "I heard it once. You said if she found the mistake, it would delay the contract, and that she should trust you." Richard took a step back. "She's lying, making this up." But his voice was already cracking. Harrison straightened. His posture shifted. "You hid a clause?" The tension in the room could have been sliced with a whisper. Richard wiped sweat from his brow. "She's a child, delirious, just like her mother." That's when Emma reached into her pocket and pulled out a crumpled note. "My mom wrote this. I thought it was just a reminder. But it's here." Margaret took the paper. It was Sarah's handwriting. 3 circled words, check clause 12-7. Beneath it, a messy scribble, Richard pressured, double-check later. Sarah's face went pale with recognition. "I wrote that, and then never saw it again." Harrison stared at Richard like a judge, hearing the final confession. With one sharp motion, he picked up the phone. "Get legal up here, now!" Richard stepped forward. "You're seriously going to believe sticky notes? And a kid?" But no one was listening. The room had turned against him. His empire of manipulation collapsed beneath his feet. Emma looked at him, not with vengeance, but with unwavering truth. "My mom always said, even the smallest lie can sink the biggest ship." Sarah, trembling, added, "He tried to convince me to ignore it. I was sick, exhausted, and I trusted too much. Her voice held more than fever. It carried betrayal. Margaret stepped closer. This presentation didn't just save a project, it saved this company. And for the first time, Harrison looked at Emma, not as a child, but as a vital piece of a better future. He turned slowly. But now we need to decide how we move forward after all this. And what if Richard wasn't the only one with something to hide? The room buzzed with tension, like static before a storm. Richard stayed on his feet, eyes blazing, hands trembling with rage and humiliation. Harrison's gaze was ice. Margaret studied the note in silence. Sarah breathed heavily, still staring him down. Emma stood beside her mother, calm but unshakable, like someone who had seen too much and survived anyway. "This is insane," Richard snapped. "You're destroying my career over scribbles from a fevered woman and a kid's bedtime stories." His tone was venomous, but cracked with desperation. "I gave this company 20 years, and now you're crucifying me over a childish misunderstanding." Sarah tried to stand, but stumbled. Daniel caught her. She looked at Harrison. "He tried to manipulate me. I didn't speak up because I thought it was just confusion, but now I see it was deliberate. And my daughter, she only shined light on what I was too scared to face." Her voice was weak, but sharp as a blade. Richard pressed on, pointing a shaky finger at Emma. "You think this is some heartwarming fairy tale. It's all a setup, a sob story designed to make you cry." But Emma didn't flinch. She squeezed her mother's hand, stepped forward, and spoke softly, but with absolute clarity. "You lied, and you hurt people. My mom would never do that." The words landed like thunder. The room fell silent. Harrison leaned back slowly in his chair, his eyes still locked on Emma. He said nothing at first. Then he reached for a blank page, signed it swiftly, and handed it to his assistant. "Richard Evans is officially dismissed from Horizon, and I want a full audit on all past contracts, starting today." Richard tried to object, but no one was listening. Security was already walking toward him. He left the room like a shadow banished by light. Harrison turned to Sarah and Emma. "I don't even know how to begin thanking you, or how to make up for overlooking your talent, Sarah." Margaret stepped up and gently placed a hand on Sarah's shoulder. "You have an extraordinary daughter, and clearly you're an extraordinary mother too." Emma smiled shyly, curling up beside her mom like a petal folding back into the stem. In her arms, everything made sense again. Data, pain, courage, and triumph. Then Harrison picked up Emma's proposal. "We're making this official today, and I want both your names on the contract." Emma's eyes widened. "Me?" Harrison nodded. "Yes, you, because none of this would have happened without you. And because Horizon needs minds like yours, young, bold, and brilliantly fearless." But before anyone could celebrate, Sarah's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen. It was the hospital. Her hands shook. She answered without a word. The next few seconds stretched into eternity. Her face dimmed, tightened, until finally the words left her lips. "The results are back. It's more serious than they thought." And just like that, the light of victory was suspended by a fragile thread of life. The call ended, and for a moment Sarah didn't move, still holding the phone to her ear, as if refusing to accept what she'd just heard. Liver complications, advanced stage, urgent treatment. The doctor's words echoed in her mind like silent hammers. Emma, sensing the shift in her mother's eyes, squeezed her hand tight. "Is it serious?" Sarah nodded, but she didn't cry. Harrison stepped forward, his voice gentle. "If you need anything at all." Sarah stopped him with a soft gesture. "The most important thing now is making sure my daughter knows everything's going to be okay." Emma turned to her, her face serious, like a grown-up. "I'll take care of you, the way you always took care of me." It hurt and healed all at once. Outside the room, Daniel was already on the phone. Within minutes, he had a list of the city's top specialists, names, numbers, even a private clinic willing to admit Sarah the same day. I know what it's like to lose someone, just because time ran out. I'm not letting that happen again. Sarah looked at him, surprised. There was something in his eyes now, something that wasn't just help anymore. In the days that followed, Sarah was admitted. Treatment began immediately. Intense sessions, lots of rest. Emma visited her every day after school. She brought paper flowers, made up stories, and napkins scribbled with calculations. "Mum, did you know the sun has to rest behind the clouds sometimes too?" Sarah smiled, weak but alive. Word of what had happened spread quickly. Emma became a symbol of resilience and early genius. Inspired by her, Harrison launched the Starlight program, an internal fund supporting single mothers and youth-led innovation projects. Emma was named the first ever junior ambassador. Wearing her signature pink dress and a tie borrowed from Daniel, she gave a speech that brought the whole room to their feet. "My mom taught me that courage doesn't mean you're never scared. It means you love someone so much that fear turns into fuel." She ended her speech with bright, tear-filled eyes. Sarah, watching from her hospital room, wept quietly. Not from pain, but from gratitude. This wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. Emma also started something of her own, a community fund to help families like hers. With help from Margaret and Daniel, she mapped the entire project on colorful sheets of paper. "We're calling it Casa Luz, because everyone deserves a place where love lives." Horizon approved the proposal with full sponsorship. A new chapter had begun, and Emma had only just started writing. One afternoon, back at home, Sarah stared out the window. In the yard below, Emma was teaching a neighbor's kid how to chart graphs with colored pencils. Daniel appeared behind her with 2 mugs of tea. "You okay?" Sarah smiled, her voice thick. "For the first time—" "Yeah." Emma ran toward them and jumped into her lap. "We're stars, Mummy. We shine bright. But any could fate have one last surprise in store for this little genius?" Months passed. Horizon Enterprises thrived like never before. The very boardroom that once held tension and doubt now pulsed with creativity, purpose, and light. Sarah, now healed, walked the halls with a new glow in her eyes. Her presence inspired not just because she endured, but because she had risen. That day, the company hosted a special event. On stage, lit by golden spotlights, stood 8-year-old Emma Thompson, small, radiant, confident. She wore a crisp white suit with pink accents and a star-shaped pin on her chest. "Today," she said into the mic, "I'm announcing something on behalf of my mom, Horizon, and every kid who listens when no one thinks they're watching." The crowd, made up of employees, investors, families, and young dreamers, fell into breathless silence. Emma flipped to the next page in her speech and revealed the creation of the Sarah Thompson Scholarship, a program for girls passionate about science, technology, and hope. It was funded by the very contract she had helped save. In the audience, Sarah wiped quiet tears from her cheeks. Next to her, Daniel held her hand, proud and soft-eyed. There was something between them now, a story still unfolding. Not the center of this tale, but part of the healing. A bridge built from quiet gestures and honest intentions. After the ceremony, Harrison walked up to Emma with a rare smile. "I've been reading your side reports, young lady." She raised an eyebrow playfully. "Side reports?" He handed her a file. "You've been working on a smart energy prototype without telling me." She shrugged. "I was waiting for the right moment." He chuckled. "And you think now's the right moment?" Emma nodded. "If not now, then when?" The final twist came in her closing words. "This new project will be built alongside public schools and universities, because talent doesn't come from golden cradles. It comes from anywhere a child listens, observes, and believes they can." The room exploded into applause, but more than that, into hope. Outside, as the event ended, a reporter approached Emma. "Do you have a final message for the people watching right now?" Emma paused for a moment, then smiled. And with the same sweetness that once silenced a boardroom, she said, "Sometimes the smallest stars shine the brightest, especially when no one expects them to shine at all." The camera slowly zooms out, capturing Sarah and Emma wrapped in a warm embrace, Daniel by their side, and the city glowing behind them, not lit by streetlights or skyscrapers, but by something deeper, from within. Have you ever met a child as brilliant as Emma? Share your story below. I'd love to hear it. And if this story touched your heart, like, share, and subscribe for more just like it. Because in the next video, you'll meet someone who had to choose between forgiving or disappearing forever.